At his father's funeral, Daniel expected grief. What he didn't expect was mockery. His wife's family laughed at him, whispered insults, and treated him like he was nothing. They assumed he had no worth, no place in the family. But his father had left one final surprise, one that would shock everyone in the room. The room was quiet but heavy. People whispered in corners, moving slowly as if afraid to break the silence. The air smelled of flowers, but the scent was almost too sweet, like it tried to hide the sadness. He walked in, his suit stiff and slightly too tight, feeling every eye on him. Some looked with sympathy, others with curiosity. But the ones he noticed most were his wife's family. They stood together near the back, a small cluster of judgment. He could feel their eyes tracing him, measuring him, trying to find flaws in his grief. There were smirks, quiet laughs, side glances shared between them. He knew what they were thinking. They thought he was weak. They thought he did not deserve the family he married into. They thought he was nothing. He forced his shoulders back and moved forward. The coffin was at the front, surrounded by white lilies and red roses. His father had been a tall man, strong and kind. Now he lay silent, and the world felt empty without him. He placed a hand on the coffin and felt the weight of loss more than ever. His father had taught him everything about honesty, about courage, about standing tall even when others pushed you down. But grief was not the only feeling. Anger curled quietly inside him. His wife's family had always looked down on him. They whispered when he spoke. They judged his choices. They laughed at his ambition. And now, at the one moment he should have felt support, they mocked him again. A cousin laughed softly, just loud enough for the others to hear. The sound was sharp in the quiet hall. He felt the heat rise to his face, but he did not respond. He would not give them that satisfaction. Not here, not now. This day was about his father. Not about their small cruelty. Friends approached, offering condolences. Some patted him on the shoulder. Others simply nodded and moved on. He tried to focus on them, but the whispers followed him like shadows. He remembered his father's voice, calm and steady, saying, "Rise above the noise. Never let their smallness touch your heart." He held that lesson tight like a lifeline. The pastor began to speak, but his words barely reached him. He was trapped in a mixture of sorrow and tension. He looked again at his wife's family. They were waiting for a reaction, for a show of weakness. He did not give it. He straightened, breathed deeply, and let the silence carry him. He remembered the moments with his father, sitting on the porch learning about life and responsibility. Those lessons now felt more precious than ever. He promised himself he would honor them no matter what. The funeral would be hard, but he would endure. He had to endure. The service continued, but the whispers never stopped. His wife's family moved closer together, forming a small fortress of judgment. Every laugh, every sideways glance felt sharp, like needles against his skin. They whispered about him, about how he had never been enough for their daughter, about how he had never achieved anything significant. He noticed the subtle ways they tried to embarrass him. The cousin who smirked while fanning herself. The uncle who shook his head as if disappointed in him. The aunt who tapped her fingers impatiently on the pew, making sure he knew she did not approve. Each gesture was small, but together they felt like an attack. He clenched his fists in his lap. He wanted to say something, to defend himself, to let them know he was not the man they assumed. But he remembered his father's words. Control your anger. Respond with dignity. Let your character speak. So he stayed quiet, breathing slowly, counting to 10 inside his mind. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, rustling the leaves. The sound reminded him of summers spent with his father, teaching him lessons about respect and patience. Those memories were a shield against the cruelty around him. He closed his eyes for a moment and let his father's voice fill the silence. But the mockery did not pause. A cousin leaned toward another and whispered loudly enough for a few nearby to hear. The words cut deep. "I can't believe she married him. Look at him. Nothing to offer." The small group laughed, thinking it clever. He opened his eyes and looked straight at them, holding their gaze. He did not speak. He did not react. The silence in return was louder than any words. He imagined telling them one day that life has a way of revealing the truth, that those who laugh too soon often pay the highest price later. The pastor continued speaking, his voice calm and steady. He recited lines about life, about love, about the impact one leaves behind. The words reminded him of his father's generosity, his wisdom, the way he had touched the lives of everyone he met. The man he was remembering had left more than money behind. He had left lessons that shaped his son into someone strong, even in the face of mockery. Still, the whispers followed him like shadows. Aunts, uncles, and cousins kept their eyes on him, waiting, hoping for a sign of weakness. He felt their judgment pressing down, trying to make him smaller. But he had learned to stand tall, even when the world tried to push him down. During the quiet moments, he felt the warmth of friends who had known his father. People who had respected him, who had valued his family. Their silent support reminded him that he was not truly alone. They were his anchor. They were a reminder that he had worth beyond what anyone else thought. The service moved slowly toward its close. He straightened in the pew again, adjusting his tie. His wife's family's small smirks had not gone unnoticed, but he refused to give them power over his grief. Every breath was a declaration. Every step forward was a promise to honor his father with dignity. Even as they continued their quiet attacks, he reminded himself that this was not the end. Life had a way of balancing itself. The truth had a way of coming out. And one day, the ones who mocked him would see what he always knew. The tension in the hall was thick, but he held steady. The whispers would not break him. Not here, not now. He had learned from the best. He would endure. And soon, the moment would come when the tables would turn. As the funeral service continued, his mind drifted away from the room, away from the whispers and the mocking eyes. He remembered the mornings spent in his father's study, the smell of old books mixed with the faint scent of coffee. His father had always been there, teaching him lessons not found in any school. Lessons about honesty, respect, and strength. He remembered sitting on the porch as a boy, listening to his father talk about life. Son, people will judge you. They will try to make you small, but never let them take your spirit. Always hold your head high. Always speak with integrity. The rest will follow. Those words had etched themselves into his heart. He thought about the summer days in the workshop, the afternoons they had spent repairing old furniture, learning the value of hard work. His father had not just taught him skills, he had taught him patience. He had taught him that the quiet effort, the unseen work, was what made a man strong. He remembered the time he had failed miserably in high school, the way he had been tempted to give up. But his father had simply said, "Failure is not the end. It is the lesson. Stand up, keep going. I believe in you." That belief had stayed with him, guiding him through life, even when others doubted him. The memories brought warmth to his grief. He could almost hear his father's voice now, calm and steady, reminding him that even in sorrow there was a path forward. He closed his eyes and imagined sitting beside him one last time, asking for advice on how to face the present moment. He could almost feel his hand on his shoulder steadying him, giving him courage. He realized that his father had prepared him for moments like this, for the subtle cruelty, the whispers, the judgment of those who did not understand him. His father had shown him how to remain calm, how to respond with dignity rather than anger. Those lessons were more valuable than any inheritance. They were armor against the world's meanness. Even as he thought of his father, he could hear the small laughs and whispers from his wife's family. It stung less now. The strength his father had given him made the mockery seem smaller. Their judgment could not touch the foundation his father had built in him. He also remembered his father's sense of humor, the way he could make even a dull day feel lighter. He smiled faintly at the memory of a fishing trip where everything had gone wrong, the boat leaking, the bait falling into the water, the sun blazing down. His father had simply laughed and said, "Life will do this to you. Learn to laugh, son. Laugh, and you will never be defeated." The thought gave him a quiet sense of hope. He understood now that this day, as painful as it was a part of the journey his father had prepared him for. The whispers, the judgment, the small cruelty, they were temporary. His father's lessons were permanent. His father's love and guidance would carry him through. He opened his eyes, returning to the room filled with people who had come to honor his father. The whispers were still there, the judgment still hung in the air, but he no longer felt small. He no longer felt powerless. He could face them. He could endure them. He could rise above. He whispered to himself, a quiet promise in the midst of grief. "I will honor you, Father. I will not let them break me. I will show them who I am. I will make you proud." After the service, the guests began to move toward the reception area. The air was still heavy, filled with polite chatter and quiet condolences. He walked slowly, still feeling the sting of his wife's family's judgment. Their whispers had not stopped. Their smirks had not faded. They seemed determined to make him feel small at every turn. He noticed the subtle ways they acted entitled. His father's old friends were approaching him with kind words, offering hugs and support. Meanwhile, his wife's family hovered nearby, exchanging glances as if to say, "See, he cannot measure up." One of them even made a quiet remark about how his career was insignificant. He caught the words and chose to ignore them. Responding would give them exactly what they wanted. The tension grew as they subtly tried to isolate him. One cousin leaned toward another and whispered, making sure he could hear, "He is barely keeping up with her. What kind of life can he give her?" Their audacity made his stomach tighten, but he remained calm. He focused on the people who had genuinely cared for his father, the ones whose respect could not be swayed by petty judgments. Even his wife seemed tense. She smiled politely at the guests, but glanced at him once or twice, uncertain how to respond to her family's behavior. He noticed the slight tremor in her hands, the way her eyes darted nervously between her relatives and him. He wanted to reach out and reassure her silently, but he held back, letting her see that he could remain strong without needing to fight. Aunt Linda approached, her voice soft but condescending. "You know, I just don't understand why your father left anything to you. You have never, achieved much on your own." He nodded politely, holding a tight smile. He could have argued, could have defended himself, but he remembered his father's lessons. He would not let petty cruelty break him. Some of the guests sensed the tension. Old friends who had known his father leaned in closer, whispering words of encouragement to him. "You were a good son," one said quietly. "Your father was proud of you." Their support was a balm to his spirit, reminding him that not everyone measured him by the narrow standards of his wife's family. Despite their whispers and judgment, he remained composed. He spoke with guests politely, thanking them for coming, listening to their stories about his father and sharing memories. Every word he spoke, every gesture he made, showed strength. The contrast with his wife's family's behavior was unmistakable. The more they tried to undermine him, the more his dignity shone. A young cousin tried one last jab, asking loudly if he had plans for the inheritance, as if expecting him to fumble and reveal weakness. He simply smiled and said, "I will honor my father's wishes just like he taught me." The words were simple but firm, leaving the cousin momentarily speechless. The whispers slowed. The smirks faltered. He could feel the shift, subtle but real. For the first time, some of the family seemed uncertain, as if realizing that their judgment would not control him. He had not spoken harshly. He had not lost control. He had simply remained himself, grounded in the lessons his father had left him. The reception continued, but he moved with a quiet confidence now. He knew the day was not over. The moment he had been waiting for, the reading of the will, was coming. And soon everything would change. Even in the midst of mockery, he realized one thing clearly. Strength was silent. Respect was earned. And the truth had a way of revealing itself, sometimes when people least expected it. The reception hall was filled with murmurs and the faint clinking of glasses. People offered condolences, shared memories, and tried to console one another. He moved slowly, still carrying the weight of his father's absence. He could feel the tension, from his wife's family lingering like a shadow over every step. Then the lawyer arrived. A tall man in a dark suit carrying a leather folder that looked unusually heavy. His expression was serious, professional. Yet there was a subtle air of anticipation in the room. People turned to look, sensing that something important was about to happen. He straightened. His heart skipped a beat. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The will. The words his father had left behind. He did not know exactly what to expect, but he knew one thing. The lawyer's arrival would shift everything. His wife's family stiffened. The smiles faltered. They had been confident moments ago, certain that his father had left nothing of value to him. Now their expressions showed a flicker of doubt. Something was different. They had assumed this day would confirm their superiority, their judgment. They had assumed wrong. The lawyer cleared his throat, drawing attention. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Mr. Jonathan Miller. As his legal representative, It is my duty to share his wishes as clearly and accurately as possible. He opened the folder carefully, as if handling something sacred. The room grew quieter. Even the murmurs faded. The guests leaned in slightly, sensing the gravity of the moment. His wife's family exchanged nervous glances. The mockery had ended for now, replaced by curiosity and a hint of unease. He could feel his pulse quicken. His hands were steady, but inside a storm of emotions swirled. Grief, hope, anxiety, and a quiet determination all mixed together. His father had always believed in him. Now the world would hear that belief in a different form. The lawyer continued. Before we begin, I ask for everyone's patience. The contents of this will are personal and important. Please listen carefully. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each person, as if to emphasize the weight of what was coming. He took a deep breath. His father's lessons echoed in his mind, patience, dignity, strength. He reminded himself that no matter what happened, he would remain composed. He would honor his father as he had promised. Aunt Linda shifted uneasily, sensing that the comfortable superiority she had assumed might be challenged. Cousins whispered quietly, trying to guess the contents. They had all assumed the inheritance would be minimal or non-existent. They had all assumed he would be left out. Their assumptions were about to be shattered. The lawyer opened the folder wider and glanced at the first page. The room grew even quieter. Guests leaned forward slightly, some curious, some apprehensive. He could see the tension building in the faces around him. Everyone was waiting for the first words. He felt a strange mix of anticipation and calm. He had endured mockery, whispers, and judgment. Now it was time. The moment his father had left for him. The words in that folder were more than money. They were justice. They were recognition of the man he had become. They were proof that his father's belief in him had never wavered. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and began to read aloud. I, Jonathan Miller, being of sound mind, wish to declare my final will and testament. To my son Daniel I leave. He paused slightly, ensuring that the room was silent, that every ear was attentive. The weight of those words hung in the air, heavy with promise. He felt his chest tighten. The moment had arrived. He did not yet know the full contents, but he knew everything would change in the next few minutes. His father's voice, his father's lessons, his father's pride, all would be revealed through these words. The whispers from his wife's family had stopped entirely. The smirks were gone. The lawyer cleared his throat and adjusted the papers in his folder. To my son Daniel, I leave all personal property, accounts, and assets I have accumulated in my lifetime. This includes the house on Oak Street, all investments, and the family business. These are to be managed responsibly and with integrity. A ripple moved through the room. He remained calm, listening intently, his chest tightening with a mix of surprise and quiet satisfaction. His father had trusted him with everything. It was not just money or property. It was a sign of absolute belief in him, a recognition that he had always deserved. His wife's family stiffened. The cousin who had laughed earlier now froze, his face pale. The aunt who had whispered insults could not hide her shock. Their assumption that he would be left with nothing had been completely wrong. Whispers died in their mouths, replaced by stunned silence. The lawyer continued. To my daughter-in-law, Emily, I leave personal keepsakes and letters I have written to Daniel over the years. These are to be treasured and read carefully, as they contain guidance, advice, and my hopes for your family. Emily looked at him, her eyes wide. She did not expect this attention from her father-in-law. His gestures were meaningful, filled with thought and love. Daniel felt a surge of emotion. His father had cared not only for him but for her as well, showing trust and respect even for those who had doubted him. The lawyer paused, glancing around the room. To the remainder of my family, I leave items of sentimental value. But the majority of my estate is intended to be used for the education, growth, and well-being of my son and his family. The tension in the room was palpable. His wife's family could not hide their discomfort. The cousin who had mocked him earlier muttered under his breath, I never thought he would get anything. The aunt shook her head in disbelief. Each word of the will revealed a deeper recognition of his worth. Daniel kept his expression steady. His heart pounded, but he maintained control. Every sentence of the will reinforced what he had always known. His father believed in him. The inheritance was more than material wealth. It was validation. It was justice. It was his father's way of showing the world the man he had become. Guests leaned forward, listening carefully. They could sense the shift in energy. What had been a day marked by grief and subtle cruelty was turning into a moment of revelation. Respect, recognition, and perhaps even humility were spreading across the room. The lawyer closed the folder slightly and said, "There are additional instructions regarding charitable donations and trusts. These will be carried out according to my son's discretion as he sees fit. Daniel, it is my hope that you will honor these wishes and continue to uphold the values we have instilled." He took a slow breath, feeling the weight of the responsibility and the pride that came with it. This moment was more than financial. It was proof that integrity, patience, and dignity were always rewarded, even when mocked or underestimated. The room fell into stunned silence. His wife's family could not speak. Their smug smiles had vanished entirely. The cousin who had whispered insults now looked at him as if seeing a stranger. Their assumptions about him had been completely shattered. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and continued. "Additionally, I have included instructions for a surprise allocation. Certain trusts, stocks, and properties have been placed under Daniel's name, not to be disclosed until today. These include substantial investments that were intended to grow over time and provide financial security." Gasps echoed quietly through the room. Eyes widened, mouths opened slightly, but no words came out. Daniel remained composed, though inside, he felt a surge of triumph mixed with disbelief. His father had ensured that everything was fair and clear. He had been trusted, honored, and respected in a way that no one could dispute. Emily squeezed his hand. She had seen the tension on his face all day, but now a faint smile appeared. She knew what this inheritance meant, not just money, but dignity, validation, and the power to move forward without fear of judgment. The lawyer looked at the remaining family members. "I hope this makes clear the intentions and values I hold dear. The estate was designed not only to provide materially, but to reward integrity, patience, and character. Daniel has proven himself worthy, and I trust he will continue to do so." Whispers broke out among the family. Some muttered disbelief. Others tried to hide embarrassment. They had laughed at him earlier, mocked his abilities, and assumed he would be left with nothing. Now they had no words. Their judgment had been proven wrong in the most public way possible. Daniel felt a sense of calm. He had endured the ridicule, held his dignity, and now the outcome spoke for itself. Every insult, every sideways glance, every whispered joke from earlier in the day had been meaningless in the face of truth. His father's faith had been unwavering, and that faith had now become undeniable proof. He stood taller, feeling a quiet strength settle over him. The guests who had known his father nodded in respect, recognizing the moment for what it was, a triumph of character over cruelty, of patience over arrogance. Emily leaned closer, whispering softly, "Your father always knew. He always believed in you." He nodded. "Yes, and today, the world sees it too." The lawyer carefully closed the folder, signaling the end of the reading. The air was thick with emotion, a mix of relief, awe, and quiet shock. His wife's family could no longer pretend superiority. They had been humbled, and the truth of his worth was clear for everyone to see. Daniel looked at the room, and for the first time that day, he felt completely at peace. He had honored his father. He had faced mockery without losing control, and he had emerged stronger, validated, and ready for whatever life would bring next. The tension in the room had shifted. His wife's family no longer smirked or whispered. Their confidence had been replaced by a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Daniel could see it clearly in their eyes. For the first time, they recognized that their judgment had been misplaced. He moved slowly toward the refreshments, greeting guests who had quietly shown support. Conversations began to flow naturally, and he noticed people turning to him with respect instead of doubt. His calm demeanor and composure had made an impression, not just on his family, but on everyone in the room. Emily stayed close, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She had been worried earlier, unsure how her family's judgment would affect him. Now she saw the quiet strength he had maintained all day. He had not reacted to mockery with anger. He had not retaliated. He had simply endured with dignity. His father's lawyer came over, offering a few words of reassurance. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. "He trusted you to handle everything responsibly, and I can see you are doing just that." Daniel nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and pride settle together. In a corner, a few guests whispered among themselves, noting how gracefully Daniel had handled the day. The story of his father's belief in him, his patience, and his strength was spreading quietly. It was a lesson that reached beyond the walls of the reception hall. Even his wife's family could not ignore it. The uncle who had sneered at him earlier looked uncomfortable. The cousin who had whispered insults avoided eye contact. Their attempts at superiority had been completely neutralized by the evidence of his worth. Daniel understood something important. This day had been more than about money. It had been about respect, about proving that integrity and patience mattered more than arrogance and judgment. He had stood firm, guided by his father's teachings, and now those lessons had been made visible for all to see. He found Emily's hand again and squeezed it gently. She smiled, a mix of relief and admiration in her eyes. Together, they walked through the room, quietly acknowledging guests and sharing brief conversations. Their connection had grown stronger through the events of the day. The lawyer announced that the legal formalities were complete, and people began to slowly leave. Daniel felt a sense of closure. Knowing that the will had been read, the legacy secured, and his father's wishes honored. The mockery was over. The lesson had been taught. For the first time, Daniel realized that true strength was not loud. It was quiet, enduring, and unwavering. It was the kind of strength that earned respect, not by force, but by character. And in that moment, he felt more in control of his life than ever before. As the guests departed, Daniel remained in the room with Emily and a few close friends. His father's lessons still resonated strongly in his mind. He had faced ridicule, endured judgment, and come out with his dignity intact. Now the air was calm, filled with quiet respect instead of tension. His wife's family lingered, clearly uncomfortable. They exchanged small whispers, but there was no laughter, no mockery. They had seen the truth. They had realized that Daniel's character, his patience, and his resilience had earned him far more than they had ever imagined. Emily looked at him, admiration and love shining in her eyes. "You were amazing today," she said softly. "I never doubted you, but seeing how you handled everything, it's incredible." Daniel smiled, feeling relief and pride. "It was not me. It was everything my father taught me. I just remembered his words." The remaining family members gradually approached, some offering quiet apologies or words of acknowledgement. Their demeanor had changed completely. The arrogance had faded, replaced by a cautious respect. They had been humbled, and in that humility Daniel found closure. He walked to the window, looking out at the garden where sunlight filtered through the trees. The day had been long, emotional, and challenging, but he had endured. His father's legacy was safe, and his own dignity had been preserved. He felt a sense of calm he had not known all day. Emily joined him, resting her hand on his shoulder. "Your father would be proud," she said, "not just of what he left you, but of who you are." He nodded, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. The laughter, the whispers, the judgment, they were all part of the test his father had prepared him for. And he had passed, not through confrontation, but through strength, patience, and dignity. He realized that life would always have challenges. People would judge, mock, and underestimate him at times. But as long as he remembered his father's lessons, he could face anything. The world could try to push him down, but he would always rise, grounded in his character. The house grew quieter as the last guests left. Daniel and Emily stood together, hand in hand, ready to face the future. The legacy was more than material wealth. It was a testament to patience, integrity, and the enduring power of family lessons. The evening sun warmed the quiet house as Daniel and Emily sat together, finally at peace. The day's judgment, whispers, and mockery were behind him. Daniel had stood strong, honored his father, and shown everyone the quiet dignity that defined him. Emily leaned against his shoulder. "It feels like a new chapter," she whispered. Daniel nodded. Today wasn't about inheritance. It was about respect, patience, and integrity. They walked through the quiet house, the golden garden light easing the day's pain. "Your father would be proud," Emily said. Daniel smiled. A new beginning had finally arrived.